So, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for the Where Are Our Children segment. So, we are going to talk about what is going on with the large amount of missing Black, Indigenous, and Latinx children. But today we're going to focus on immigration because immigration is the segue to a lot of our children missing. We have great speakers on deck for you today. I am going to begin to bring them on one by one, and they will indeed introduce who they are, share what their experiences with immigration are, and from there we'll go into the conversation. So first, let me bring on my friend, Miss Deborah Mendoza. Deborah, thank you so much for coming. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
My name is Deborah Mendoza. I'm with a couple groups. I'm with 10,000 Fearless response team, and I am also with the Brown Berets, the Seminawa. And I do have a couple organizations that I work with. So
great. Thank you for coming. And she definitely understands the part of about our children missing, specifically from the Indigenous and also Latinx communities. All right. So next, I'm going to bring on my sister, Danielle X. Hi! Go ahead. Who you are. Tell us about your organization and what your experience with immigration is.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me. I am a member of the Nation of Islam. We work in the community with everybody. I am the point of contact here in Dallas for the 10,000 Fearless Emergency Responders. And also I am the a sex trafficking advocate and a mentor for women and for children.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Looking so forward to what you add to the conversation. And then we have our attorney. Go ahead, Attorney Pink. Introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Ting. I practice immigration law here in Dallas and also Houston, Texas. And, I'm not expert in everything. Did you hear me on?
Yeah, you froze up on us there for a minute. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I'll reintroduce myself. My name is John Ting. I practice immigration law in Dallas and Houston, Texas. And although I don't consider myself an expert in asylum law, especially with all these changing policies with Trump administration, I'm happy to share what I've learned.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Now we have another speaker, and she apparently is having trouble getting in with us. But I really want to work to get her on board because she was instrumental, in getting all of this together. And that would be Nadia Montoya. But like I said, she's having a tough time, it looks like, getting in. Okay. So while Nadi works on getting in, I want to go ahead and explain the background to this presentation. Okay, so since the murder of George Floyd, we have a lot of organizations, and that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back when it came to social justice issues. So I see all of these organizations coming together. And for many of us, our plights are the same thing that the Black community deals with, other communities deal with as well. So I do all of these presentations for our community. So I would like to also do them for other communities. And so I reached out to Nadi, and like I said, she put it together and recruited the people, and here we are. Now Nadi is in. Go ahead, Nadi, introduce yourself. Tell us about your organization and what your experience with immigration is.
Hey, everybody. My name is Nati Montoya, and I work with several organizations. I am a Brown Beret. I do work with La Monarca, and I mainly in the past have done food distribution, but my experience with immigration is my family are immigrants, and I've seen the struggles that they have had to endure to become citizens or to even qualify for any help from the government. And I currently live in a neighborhood where we have people from Africa, from Middle Eastern countries, from Latin America, and they're all experiencing the same fear with the current administration of being deported. So that is me. Thank you so much for doing this.
You are more than welcome. Thank you for pulling it together. And again, for pulling together the expertise we have on this panel. I am very grateful because the thing is, okay, I clearly am a member of the Black community. I only know what I see on TV in regards to immigration. I know that there are children being kept in cages. Because I taught at a public charter school last year, I had mainly Latinx and Black students in my class, so I could ask them things. Like I had one student suffering from mental illness and familial issues, and she couldn't get the help the rest of us could get because she's undocumented. And the fact that if they were in a car that got stopped, there was a good chance they would end up down at that border. So that's the fear they live under. But other than that, I only see the surface. So for me, the goal was for you all to teach me what's really going on, the seedy, ugly truth of what's really going on down there, like how the young ladies are being harassed and things of that nature, how these children and parents are coming up missing. And then to have an attorney on so that if I have legal questions or anyone has legal questions, we can definitely address those. So I would go ahead and lead off with a question. I have heard stories of what is being done to the women down there. What is happening?
Well, I've heard some reports about sexual abuse of women and children by these CBP, Custom Border Protection Officers. I'm not sure if there's going to be any lawsuits yet, but there has been complaints about that so far. So that came out about a month ago, at least.
Wow. I've heard it goes as far as when these women, if they have children, the children are sold on the black market. Is that true? Danielle X is saying yes. And if you want to speak, unmute yourself and go ahead and speak.
Yes, ma'am. There's been documentations and much research on that in behalf. It's even been posted on CNN, in New York Times, how these children are being abducted or used in sex trafficking. They're being utilized as breeders, and a breeder is someone who is forced to have a child. They take that child and they can use a child at their liking, be it either sex trafficking, labor trafficking, human trafficking, and of course, organ harvesting. They have found many children that have been put on ice, freezers, and their organs are missing.
Okay. Now, see, and this is my point. Somebody that's not in the community or in the work, I didn't know that.
One thing that also has been shown, and it's not as nefarious as what Sister Danielle shared, is that a lot of these children are being documented properly. So let's say there's an affluent family that for some reason can't have children. They can go and adopt these children, and there really is no paper trail to follow.
You have got to be kidding me. So, wow. So the children basically go on the black market.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my goodness. And
that's why it's called the silent crime, because it's happening right before our eyes so quietly. We don't know what the motion is, but we see the motion and can't really pinpoint what's going on. But the black market definitely for organ harvesting is growing and a lot of those children are being taken in for that. And like it was mentioned earlier, the abduction is happening, and those children are used to their liking, be it labor laws, be it picking cotton, be it picking vegetables in a field, be it being someone's maid, living in a basement and being mistreated, and also the porno world. They're used in Pornhub. A lot of children and immigrants are used in the Pornhub world.
Oh my.
Yes, ma'am.
This is bad. See, again, I in my mind, those kids are just down and they're being kept in deplorable conditions. But that's to the extent all I know. I didn't know all of this was going on. As an attorney, John, are you aware of all of this? And here's my question. If I'm the parent of these children, what recourse do I have to stop this or get my child back?
As sad as these stories are, unfortunately, fortunately for my clients, they have not happened to them. So I haven't personally done the research of what kind of legal recourse or what type of investigation, or they would need to go first. Maybe Danielle or Deborah would know better than I would on that. But in my scenario, of most of my clients, the children, if they were to come into the country themselves, they're considered unaccompanied minors, and they go through a different channel per se in terms of federal custody, and then into a nonprofit custody. So we can talk about that later. But
wow. Well, I have a couple of questions. Number one, Danielle X, you said human trafficking, organ trafficking, donor. You said 2 or 3 different traffic. What were the trafficking?
3.
What were they?
Well, they all fall under human trafficking.
Okay.
Kind of like the pieces of the pie. You have the human trafficking. You have the labor laws go into that.
Okay.
Slavery goes into that. Then you have sex trafficking. Then you have the organ harvesting.
So we have labor, human trafficking. Well, human trafficking is all of it, but we've got labor, sex, and organ.
Yes.
Got you. Okay, because we only hear about, well, here in Dallas, it's all about the sex trafficking that goes on here, and we'll save that conversation.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Can I make one point about what Danielle mentioned about the labor and sex trafficking? In terms of immigration law, it all falls under human trafficking in terms of a specific visa called T visa. Yeah. And most people don't know that, or of course the general public, even I had to learn about through the years of experience, right? That labor trafficking, if someone has suffered through labor trafficking, whether unpaid wages, for example, they can apply for a T visa, which eventually that person can receive a resident status to live in America. But overall, what I want to share with that is because when people know about this type of visa, they're more likely to share and report to law enforcement. It's similar to, you may have heard of U visa. That's available for people who are victims of abuse. Just want to share that tidbit.
All right. So we said, okay, I'm trying to draw a diagram. Human trafficking consists of sex, organ, and what was the third one?
Sex trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, and organ harvesting. Okay.
But now, do we not count the putting the babies on the black market to be adopted illegally? Wouldn't that be a form of trafficking?
That's human trafficking. That falls under the human labor and traffic. All that goes in together.
Okay, that was the other one. Labor. Yeah. So really, when it comes to human trafficking, there are 4 prongs. You have the babies, labor, and organ and sex. See my little bad picture?
I love it.
So that is what human, and I'm gonna really do this up so that we know this. So it's really 4 prongs. They're trafficking babies, they're for labor, organ, and sex. Wow. And see, again, I don't know this. if I'm not in the work or in the actual community.
I think there was
Maddie, you
something
got
that
something you want to add?
Deborah wanted to add something.
Yeah, I think
And there's somebody's microphone that's
that-
clicking.
yeah, I don't know who's this clicking, but one thing that I wanted to add is that the countries that where these people are coming from are so poor that the families of the children sometimes aren't able to go with the children to the borders. So what they're doing
Deborah,
is their children.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Your microphone is cackling and we can't hear you very well.
Can you hear me now? Okay. You can hear me now? Okay. What I was saying is that the countries where these children are coming from are so poor that the families are actually sending their children with other people so that way they can have a better life. So what they're doing is they're sending their children, they're staying behind, or just sending them with aunts and uncles, family members, and hoping that they'll come cross the border and have a chance of a better life, not knowing that their children are being put up for these types of trafficking. So our thing is we're trying to get the word out to the people out in these small communities in Mexico, like to tell them, stop sending your children, stop sending your families, stop, because this is what's happening at the border. They're being separated and they're being, taken from you, and you're never going to see them again, and you're not even going to know if they're alive or not. Then there's not even a way of tracking them. Like Nafi said, you can't track them.
I want to make a comment on that. Dr. Grayson, can you hear me? Yes, ma'am. And Deborah saying that it's an unfortunate situation, but back in the time when people looked at the Statue of Liberty as a place of peace and of opportunity and a chance to be able to establish family and jobs and to be able to have your family be safe. People were coming to Ellis Island to be able to get that. They would get on boats from many directions to be able to come here and find a way to make what you think that you were coming from was not a good condition or lifestyle. They will come to America to find opportunity. And so now it's coming to a point that where this is becoming a nightmare for many people. And you look at the indigenous people in the communities, and they have to be documented to come here, and they have to be separated from their families to be able to find a piece of hope and chance, which is not fair. And these children are being taken from their mothers and their fathers, and they can't speak much English oftentimes, and they're trying to struggle and figure it out, and their parents don't have a way to find them. Just imagine going to bed at night and your children are not there, nor do you know where they are. That causes a lot of division in our communities, and that has to stop. And looking into the African communities, being on ships coming to America, that happened to us over 500 years ago. We came to a strange land among strange people, and now we are being forced to be workers. And now they document it in the books as we came here as by choice as migrant workers. There was no choice in that. And a lot of these other communities are being forced to come here and being forced into an environment. And so if you apply for food stamps or you apply for Medicaid, you're begging. We didn't choose to come here. We were forced here, and now we were put into a position where they have nothing else for us to do. We're kind of like a bad rash, trying to find a way to get rid of us, go back to Africa or go back to Mexico. This is our land. And then, you are additional to what's going on right here. So the native communities and the indigenous communities are taking back what's ours, but we should have to fight and get a legal situation to go on to be able to be a part and be a human being and not be vandalized or mistreated by someone who's bored or someone who has money. That's not fair.
And then you need to take into consideration the generational trauma this is causing.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
us, when we were enslaved, that created generational trauma. Now, we're going on about immigration and missing children. What impact? Well, I don't know if immigration has an impact on the indigenous community, but indigenous community does have missing children. Nadia, I'll go ahead and let you expound on that one.
So some of the highest numbers for missing women and children come from the indigenous communities because the lack of reporting. The missing and murdered indigenous women movement started by indigenous women because the federal government really wasn't doing anything to document the numbers or to try to find these women. The families, the communities, they had to start their own grassroots search and rescue, so to speak. And they would have to get their own cadaver dogs. They would have to work amongst themselves to find evidence, bring it to the police. And, you know, the way the police would feel outside of the reservation is, well, you have your own police force, you know, you fall under the FBI, you have to report this to the FBI. Well, the American Indian, forget the name of the official bureau that is supposed to do all that. Number one, they're underfunded. Number two, they're understaffed. And number three, there is a highway called the Highway of Death that runs through the West, where you can literally take pins and put it on a map. And it's like all these women are going missing and all these children are going missing. And it's a huge route for truckers. It's a huge route for bikers. It's a huge route for people who are on vacation. And so now that all these communities have, you know, come together and joined forces, now within their own movement, they put out, you know, missing persons reports, and they put the stress on the police, not just in the United States, but also in Canada, to take this seriously. And a question that I had for Attorney Ting, I have read in 2 articles that Homeland Security is not filing persons and children. You know, they're supposed to give them numbers, right? But they're not doing that for these people. So when these children are going missing, there's really no way to find them. Am I correct? Because these people are also indigenous to the Americas. Most of them are poor people from the indigenous community. When we say indigenous, for some reason in America, we think American Indian, but the borders, they didn't exist once upon a time. So I know it's kind of a loaded question, but how are these people being documented?
Well, in general, thanks for bringing that up, Nati. In general, people who, migrants, let's call it that, I guess, because some people like to use the word undocumented. I don't think any of us want to use the word illegal, but undocumented or migrants. When they enter cross the border, they're supposed to be issued a alien identification number, or sometimes, or in the future, when they get a benefit like a work permit, for example, or a resident card, they're also referred to as USCIS number. But anyway, when they're crossing the border, they are supposed to be given an identification number. Okay, and that's why, and just in general, I can't speak about the indigenous population who are being not documented in terms of numbers, but that's why, in general, it's disheartening to know that children are being separated from their parents, because every report, I just read the report again from the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security DHS, that they have unreliable data. So the main question is, you know, how can we find these children? How can they be matched up with their parents? You know, they may have alien number, or some kind of identification number, but it doesn't list who their parents are. It should, because some documents that I've requested from what we call Freedom Information Act, which usually journalists anyone can request documents. And so when I receive these documents in terms of federal documentation when someone crosses through the border, let's say 10 years later, for a client, it will show, like, for example, oh, who your parents' names, your date of birth, things of that nature. But in terms of indigenous population, to answer your question directly, I don't know the answer to that because it may depend on exactly where someone has been picked up. And it sounds like you're saying the articles you read, that they've been picked up specifically by the government. Is there a specific agency?
Yes. So what I meant by that was a lot of these poorer families, they are, in fact, like Spanish is not their first language, so to speak. They are like, they speak Nawa or they speak Muisca. They speak different languages from the native communities that they grew up in. That's a lot of them are just so poor that coming to the United States is their only way of livelihood. But I read in an article that any of the people that are coming, they're falling under Homeland Security, and Homeland Security is not sharing that data with other agencies, and they're just putting them on buses or in hotels and then shipping them off to God knows where. So there's really no way to track them.
That certainly, if I can respond to that, Nati, in general, when, let's say, a client, even a potential client comes to me for a consultation and say, how can we find my family member? We usually get an idea of which region they may have entered the United States. And then we just literally call every single detention center. It's very sad because there is on the ICE website.gov, a detainer locator. Many people know about this, nonprofit agencies and attorneys, but it's not updated. If everyone in immigration world knows, in terms of practitioners, knows that these systems, they're not updated very accurately. And if it does, it may take 2 or 3 weeks. And so in terms of tracking, it's very unreliable. And you mentioned a different language, a different dialect of Spanish, for example. I'm not sure if I shared the notes with y'all before, but I did review a subcommittee hearing for Department of Homeland Security in July of 2020, this year. And this is an anecdote of how slow the government is. The July 2020 hearing was about the 2 children who died in CBP custody. And that happened in December 2018. Can you believe that? So what I'm trying to say is that things move very slowly. And so I know, Dr. Grayson, you asked like what accountability or what legal enforcement mechanisms, even if there was one, it's very slow. People in general talk about lawsuits being very slow, but in government, it's even slower. And in July 2020 hearing, unfortunately, there's political banter from mostly conservative side, but in general, another evidence of why everything's slow is that the Inspector General of Department of Homeland Security provided his report, and then politicians, leaders, political leaders ask questions as follow-up, right? But then they say, okay, well, when can you give me the information? Unfortunately, it's not like, okay, I'll give it to you next week. It's usually several months down the line. So I just want to share that.
On the heels, oh, go ahead, Deborah.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. I was going to ask you, attorney, is it true that the immigration fees are going up in October?
Yes, unfortunately, the USCIS fees are going up. Specific to this theme of this today and the next couple weeks, asylum fee. Okay, so it used to be free. It still is free until most fees are going up October 2nd this year. They did propose a rule last year, and it's just finally trickling in now. But I really encourage anyone, if someone thinks they're eligible, please speak to an attorney. Please do not go to a notario or notary. For folks who are not unsure what I'm talking about, referring about, notario, you can consider similar to a notary in the United States. But in some Spanish speaking countries, they're considered to have a legal license, but in America, they do not. We just pay like $20, I think it is, or $100 to be a notary. It's so different. So anyway, even if someone has had success before from a notary, please take high caution on that, because a lot of people who may have so let's say criminal history, it may not necessarily, depending on the type of crime, it may not affect them for immigration, but most of them do have some kind of negative consequence. So for us, if we have someone come in the office, they have ABC type of crime, we say, sorry, we just can't help you. And we just have to be the bad news bearer, right? Don't apply. Go ahead, Daniel.
I have a question in that, because we're mentioning fees, we're mentioning having to even get a lawyer. My thinking is, if the children perhaps or the families are separated in America, even in Mexico, why are we having to pay fees to go find missing children or missing family members? Shouldn't it be the love and desire of a person or a human being? Not saying for you, but if my child comes up missing and I have to go pay somebody to go find, we have law enforcement, we have organizations and groups who are on payroll to do these things, and we have to go and get additional help to go find someone's child or to go match the families back together. That should be automatic. That to me indicates, in my personal opinion, it's some more foul play being done. Because if I have to go search and go find people, because say, for example, you go out there and you do your investigation and you don't find a child or find a mother who's missing, and they're somewhere, right? They didn't just disappear on the mother wheel and just go in the clouds. They're somewhere. So we're having to go get legal people and get legal involved when the people should be able to make these things happen because we have these organizations for this reason, I thought, right? And that makes your job even harder, because you're looking for someone and you got to start from scratch with no data.
Right. Well, Danielle, I'm sorry. When I meant fees being increased it's mostly with USCIS, okay?
Mm-hmm.
For usually affirmative applications, like a work permit, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And it is frustrating. I can say I would suggest rely on law enforcement, like y'all have mentioned. I know they're sometimes not reliable, it sounds like, unfortunately, but I wouldn't know personally as myself being a licensed attorney, not exactly know which step to go to. In fact, I think all of y'all in the y'all speaking know better than I do in terms of that, with respect to that, because my focus in terms of what Deborah asked about the fees is, for example, after they have been found, for example, and then in the U.S., then I can help with in terms of the application, for example. But no, you don't have to hire a lawyer, for sure. You don't have to. There's a lot of nonprofits. I even know a licensed attorney in Texas who's at the border that has given her really a lot of time pro bono meaning for free. And in fact, I don't know how she gets paid for a living, but she has taken a lot. She's won awards because she's given out her free time for a lot of cases, but she's one person, right? I wish there's more attorneys that are able to assist, and people that are nonprofits. Even with nonprofits, sometimes there's not enough attorneys within their staff, their team, right? And so sometimes the work is kind of just spread out.
Yes, sir.
Like how I think Dr. Grayson's trying to do is, collective activism. I think is a great organization that you're trying to get collaborative work, right? Partnerships in that way. And that's what I hope more nonprofits can do to help with reunifying families.
I think they will. I want to go back. I want to two questions, basic questions. Number one, if Mexico knows that these people are leaving, why won't you do something to change the situation and stop it? Number two, and these are basic questions. Y'all assume everybody know, but I promise I don't know. Number two, my second question is, it's to my understanding there are two ways that someone from another country, an immigrant, can become a legalized citizen. What are those two ways, and why is there a difficulty? So I'm gonna let you. Number one, why won't Mexico fix the issue? Anybody know? Anyone want to take a step? Okay, well, let's go on to the
Nothing.
second question.
I think Deborah could probably answer that first one better than I can.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I've always said this. The U.S. goes into other countries and they destroy their government. They destroy it. They weaken it, so that way they can put the borders and strengthen the U.S., strengthen the U.S. dollar. So when we say, why doesn't Mexico fix the problem? It's not like they don't want to. They want to. Even now, even today, we have people in Chihuahua that are fighting for a treaty that was done back in, was it 1814 or I don't know, 1844. And I mean, they're fighting for water. The U.S. wants Chihuahua's water. Chihuahua's fighting for their water, not to send it over here. Why does the U.S. want their water? You know, for what? Well, you know, just to weaken, again, it's just to weaken the government. So that way they could take the money away from the campesinos, which is the, you know, the people that work the land. So that's why they're over there. They're protesting. They're fighting. You know, I've put some stuff on my Facebook on that. But that's what the U.S. does. They go into different countries and they weaken their government. They weaken everybody's government. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of the School of Americas, but the School of Americas is here on U.S. soil, and they train assassins to go into other countries. If you look up School of Americas, you will find the leaders and the government officials that they have murdered, assassinated, with the people that they have trained here on U.S. soil. So they've been doing this for years. They've been doing this for decades, you know, where they go into different countries and they weaken their government. So yeah, Mexico is trying their best. Mexico is trying their best. They have the cartel, which is, you know, of course, we already know the cartel is very big and is involved with the government. But why is the cartel even operating? Because of the drug system. Why is the drug system so big over there? Because of the need. What is the need? The U.S. is so profitable for, you know, for them to make the money bringing it here to the U.S. because I don't see too many drug addicts in Mexico. You know, I see a lot of them here. So yeah, I think that what it is that Mexico is trying, but you know, it's just the U.S. is really, really making it hard for them. And then they wonder why these people are trying to come into the U.S. for a better life. These people are trying to save their life. You know, you got cartels and you've got people trying, you know, wiping out villages, wiping out families, wiping out the head of their families, you know, so that way there's no money coming into you know, the household. So yeah, I think that Mexico's trying their best. And other countries.
I'd like to add a little bit, if I can, Dr. Grayson. So, you know, I knew about this growing up, but I've seen a lot of recent documentaries about the drug war. And, you know, we all know the name Noriega, right? If you don't, you can look it up. And we all know the name of the infamous Colombian drug cartel from Medellin. I'm not going to say their name because to me they ruined my parents' country. But in the late 70s and throughout the 80s, the United States actually started the so-called war on drugs, right? But they were sending money and planes to these Central American countries, and they using that money, that profit from that money, to pay for their so-called their wars with the Russians, and we hear about the Cold War. Well, how did they fund that? They funded that through the sale of cocaine and crack cocaine. And where did they get it? Well, they had farmers in Central America and in South America. So then we had this war on drugs because no longer was the crack epidemic just on in the Black neighborhoods and the Latin neighborhoods and the poor neighborhoods. Suddenly, the cocaine epidemic was hitting, white suburbia and upper middle class to rich households. And then all of a sudden, we got to end this drug problem, when it's well documented that our country started this. So what ended up happening? A lot of these farmers that were growing cocaina, their own governments would come in and try to destroy them. And they would, the question would be, well, why are you doing this? And the farmers would say, because you are not helping us in any way. Like, we're not making any money from you guys. Like, we're living in poverty, but these cartels, they're willing to pay us a living wage. Then the cartels, they have more influence than the actual governments. So now the cartels are actually running the governments, and they have been for a very long time. So we have this systemic problem. Then you have, these poor people that are farmers usually, and they want something better for their children, their grandchildren, themselves. And that's when they're like, okay, we got to leave El Salvador because the cartels run everything, and they want our sons to join this gang. And if they don't, they're going to kill them. It really is a very horrible situation. And then, you had a lot of the government sending people back to countries like El Salvador. And these people were already affiliated with gangs. So then they took that mentality back to their own countries. And now we have this systemic problem just getting worse and worse and worse. So that's my 2 cents.
Sister Danielle, I thought you had something. Did you have anything to add to that?
I got a whole lot, but I'm gonna keep it simple, real simple. But I was because when you mentioned Noriega, we all know he was on payroll with the CIA, 1971, that helped to fund the war. And for you all on that end, Nathia and Deb, that brought a whole different demon to your areas. But for us, in the predominantly Black hooded areas, crack destroyed many of our families, and it was all a hidden agenda that the government was well aware of. We're looking at killing our people, and the low-level dope dealer gets arrested, but the higher powers that be never did not one day in prison. But the guy who's trying to feed his family and feed himself to hustle just to make it through got sent to jail for life, and then the guy who was over all of this never got touched. But I want to ask you all, what do you think about us finding, in order for us to be able to get what we fight for? We want justice, we want fairness, we want peace. What do you all think about us formulating and getting our own territory? Because as long as we're living in an environment with people who don't have the same intention as you, have hidden agendas, we need our own space. We need our own territory, our own communities, our own policing to cut all of this sex trafficking, human trafficking, organ harvesting, police brutality among the indigenous people. You all are you all are on your own reservations and still being messed with, still being violated. So what do you all think about us having our own space? Those who are like mind, and we formulate ways to be able to provide for our own, to eliminate the demonic thinking, the vampire eaters, those individuals. What do you all think about that?
She called them vampire eaters. But I want y'all to go back and answer my question on the 2 ways, but I do want to answer that. As somebody that was raised in an area, I was raised predominantly around Caucasians. My high school class had a graduation. We had 72 people, and only 2 of us were Black. So I was raised in an environment where a lot of the racism I sustained, I didn't even know at the time was racism. I thought that's just how things worked. But in seeing today where we are, and I always thought we could live cohesively, because I'm going to be honest, there were plenty of times where Caucasian people took better care of me than my own. But today, I just, with the current presidential administration's emboldening of racist foolishness, and now I see folks for where they are, I'm done. I take me to Wakanda. I can go, because I have lost faith in us coexisting in the same space respectfully, where everybody's life supposedly matters. I don't think that can happen. I don't want it like my indigenous brothers and sisters are on a reservation, but it's still controlled by them. I want your hands off. I want a line drawn. And if you cross that line, I can get you back over it, alive or any other way we need to get you back over it. I have lost faith in us existing cohesively.
I think Attorney Ting can kind of help me out with this one. It is very systematic within our own communities. So if talking about undocumented people from South America, I used to live next to a woman who would charge people, her own people. She was from Guadalajara. She would charge them $5,000 a month to stay in her house. $5,000 per person. $5,000.
Wow.
So, you know, systematically, we see this in our own communities. You know, I lived in Richardson, and I had friends that were from Somalia, and, you know, they came over on a working visa, and then they had children, and their own community was doing the same thing to them, and they could be kicked out at any moment, all their stuff on the side of the street. And that would happen a lot. And they would come and stay with us for weeks on end. But I think Attorney Ting can share some of his experience, because as an attorney, I'm sure you've seen this many times in different communities.
I have, and that's thank you for bringing that up, Nati. That's why I mentioned the notario distinction. If you had to hire, you know, someone to help you with your immigration paperwork, you know, then I would suggest talking to a lawyer as opposed to someone that you assume is going to help you the right way. Because what Nati said is that unfortunately some people within your own ethnic community will take advantage of your situation. And even if you were to hire a lawyer or someone who doesn't have a legal license, please continue to do your own research. Even, I can't say every immigrant that comes in the country eventually has a smartphone, but a lot of my clients do have smartphones. So at this point, and now Wi-Fi is, or internet, there's a lot of internet access, right? But please use it to your advantage to make sure that what you're applying for is actually possible. You're eligible for it. And
one of the 2 ways for us to become
there you go.
legal.
So actually, Dr. Grayson had asked earlier, what are, I guess, the 2 general ways people can apply? I like to call it 3 different categories, really. For the folks that we're considering helping out, trying to help out right now, would be considered like the victim-based visas, like the human trafficking visa, the U visa. There's also something called Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, that actually President or Vice President Biden helped out with. And something like that, by the way, is very political, and it shouldn't be, because a lot of laws like the tax cut from a couple years ago, they're only usually set for a number of years, let's say 5 years. Then it has to be voted on again. And another thing that you have to talk about your, sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but the U visa, so victim visas, it doesn't have to be just like a spousal or boyfriend girlfriend relationship. It can be someone mugged you at a 7-Eleven, for example. But those have a congressional limit. 10,000 visas every year. And at this point, you'll be shocked, but there's almost a 5 to 10 year wait list. So let's say you apply today, you have to wait another 5 to 10 years to be approved. So it's just crazy to me.
I'm confused. So you got a U visa. You get that for being a victim?
Yes, because the caveat to that is that you have to cooperate, share your file report to law enforcement, for example, the police, right? And so, but if you don't do that, then you don't even you cannot even apply. You're not eligible.
So I'm somebody that's an immigrant and I'm here like on a work visa. I guess here's my question. How am I here in the first place?
Okay, so let's take a step back. A good amount, let's say 50% of my clients have entered the country with what immigration calls without inspection. Some people call it undocumented, without papers, right? So not actually a good amount of people do not have a work permit at all. Now, granted, some people are working without authorization, but that's another topic we can talk about. But people are still able to work because in the U.S. there is no mandatory e-verify, if you will. So employers, there's no like requirement for employers to check specifically if they have work permit. But anyway, so yes, for someone to apply for a U visa, you do have to report to police so that the law enforcement can do its due diligence to go through the prosecution process with the district attorney. And it doesn't require prosecution to a conclusion, just have to file that you've cooperated to law enforcement. So that's why I think this past year, this pandemic is a concern for people who are suffering from domestic abuse because everyone's staying at home, right? If they have to, if they don't have to be working outside, because they don't have the opportunity to report what's going on. So it's very tragic, unfortunately.
So if I can be here undocumented in a relationship, and let's say my spouse, abuses me, my boyfriend abuses me, then I can apply for a U visa.
Yes, you can.
What's to stop me from having a dude beat me up?
Well, to stop.
And then just saying,
in the future, even after that.
Okay.
Okay, I see what you're saying. The U visa application, these applications we usually refer to them some kind of 3-digit number, but that's not important for today's session. But these type of applications are related to victim visas, essentially this category. There's no requirement to inform the spouse or the abuser. So that's the key item there that's helpful to the abused, the survivors.
Okay. All right. So now that's one way to get in.
That's one way. The other two ways, I'll just make it real quick, is family based. So if you're married to a U.S. citizen, married to a permanent resident, or eventually, or for example, married to you're filing through a sibling, brother or sister, but some categories take many years. If they're born in Mexico, for example, it may take 10 years. So that gives me an example. The other way is through employment, if a company sponsors them. But even those through employment, it's very limited categories as well.
So for U's visa, you only get 10,000 per year.
Correct.
How many for the family based?
Family based, yes, there is. If it's through marriage to a U.S. citizen, there is no limit. But if it's through, like a brother and sister category, it is fiscally limited. Let's see here. I can pull it up real quick.
And then employment, are there limits on those?
Yes, there are. So that's why it creates a backlog for certain categories.
So let's say I'm applying for the U-based, and I got a 5-year wait period. What do I do in that 5 years? Do I get to stay?
You do get to stay. They usually sometimes after a year or two, they give you some kind of provisional letter, just saying you're essentially more or less on paper. It looks like you're eligible, but you have to wait another X amount of time because of the wait list, because of the limit, 10,000 per year.
So there are three ways in: employment, family-based, and U visa.
Victim-based visas, which includes the U visa.
Okay.
Attorney Ting, I have a question. What about military service?
Military service, there is something called parole in place. Have you heard of that, Nati? So, for example, the parole in place, PIP for short, that really benefits the folks who are who entered the country without papers, and why it benefits them is because they don't have to go to their birth country for an interview. And for people who enter the country with a visa but overstayed, meaning the visa has already expired, let's say 10 years ago, as long as they stayed in the country during that entire time, they don't have to interview in their birth country, for example. But for folks who don't enter with a visa, you have to go back to your birth country eventually, usually after a waiver. But for those who are eligible for parole in place application, it essentially saves them from doing that. And then, so for example, we've had clients who are married to a U.S. citizen, but their adult son or daughter has served in military, U.S. military. As long as they show in that documentation, they file that to the local USCIS office as a first step. Hopefully that answers the question.
Mm-hmm. It does. So we've got three ways in. Now, the military parole in place after they serve, they can be deported? Because I've seen that happening.
They can be, unfortunately, even just a high level. I mean, even someone who has become a U.S. citizen, not through birth, they can have that revoked. Although it's rare. I mean, that's come up in the Trump administration. I've had to help people or review cases for especially military folks who have been deported. And the case I reviewed, they have had some kind of crimes before. But most of the time I don't know the full story. I don't know their life, right? But to give them a benefit of doubt, for example, PTSD, things like that, mental illness, it's a serious concern, especially in the military or even law enforcement, right? But just humanity, right? I mean, just going through something traumatic experience, like we're talking about families being separated, children being separated. It's something that people don't talk about. And I think we need to do that more often. At least in the Asian community, East Asian community, we just don't talk about it at all. We just, pat you on the back. I mean, they don't even hug. I mean, I can't speak for other families, but I mean, it's very important, right? The little thing.
It is very important. I hate that. Well, even in the Black community, we go and fight in the military and you still come back and get treated like second-class citizen. And then I have seen, and I guess I'll ask you all, what are your thoughts of the Netflix documentary Immigration Nation? Was it on point? Did it represent well or okay?
If I don't mind, if y'all don't mind, if I may speak just a little bit about that, I can go on forever. But the intro scene where there was like 5 or 6 ICE agents going into an apartment, I believe, New York City. Mm-hmm. They knock on the door. The adult daughter opens the door. She didn't even open the door initially. She said, "Who is it?" And they try to act like your friend. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they act like your friend, say, "Oh, I just need to talk to you. I'm looking for someone," but they didn't even mention who they're looking for until I believe they went inside the home, the apartment. And then they say, "Oh, well, we need to take your dad. Is he here?" And so I just want to give a quick client experience in ICE agent in Texas. They went to a home looking for, let's say, Bob Smith. Okay. I'll just make up a random name. And then Bob Smith's not there. Bob Smith didn't open the door. It was Bob's brother opened the door. And then the ICE agent says, "Well, who are you? What's your name? And what is your status, by the way?" People feel compelled, any kind of law enforcement officer, and then they feel compelled to share, "Oh, I'm not from here. I'm from Mexico." So then that by itself, unfortunately, is enough to put them in custody. So anyway, it does depict it. I didn't watch the whole thing yet, but it does depict it very accurately, unfortunately.
I feel that they mislead people. They also said they were the police, not ICE. And apparently that is allowed. So they're allowed to mislead. And that's what law enforcement does. I have been taught by law enforcement. That's what they do. They lie. Let me hear Nadia, Deborah, Danielle. What did y'all think of it if you watched it? Some of it had me in tears.
Yes, and Dr. Grayson, watching it, it's like, for me, watching Roots, it bothers me, right? It's like watching Shaka Zulu, it bothers me. It's some information in there that's true, but a lot of it's animated, right? A lot of it's just more for entertainment. So watching that particular movie, it had me in tears. Because we openly know the problem, right? We openly see what's going on, right? But what's being done? You can talk about it and you can organize and try to do, but people are still suffering. People are still dying. We're still being mistreated, and it's open. They can make a movie with a plot, but that plot had to come from an idea from somewhere. So to see that happening, and they make these movies as entertainment purposes, and we watch it and watch our history on TV, and we're emotionally unbalanced. But then after we get through watching it, then what? It's kind of like, wow, somebody was filming it. Somebody came up with a script. So it's there, but are people suffering? So to see it, I get the idea, right? But to see that happening was like, oh my gosh. And then we get up and we move on as if nothing ever happened. We talk about it, but we ain't doing nothing to really fix the daggone problem. It's like, what the hell, excuse my language, is going on? Like,
you're right.
Yes,
and that is, I'm gonna ask Deborah and Nadia about the Immigration Nation, their points, and then we're gonna wrap it up on what we can do to diminish this issue of the way that immigration is being facilitated in this disunited States of America. Deborah and Nadia, did y'all watch Immigration Nation?
I watched a couple episodes. I couldn't watch it all. It's like watching one of those horror movies, like, hey, don't open the door. Hey, don't look behind that curtain, kind of thing. You just want to say, hey, we passed out, like, I don't know how many Know Your Rights pamphlets and cards and stuff, where you're just like, we've been doing this for years, your Know Your Rights information and things like that. So, you don't have to open the door. You don't have to, answer their questions. You don't have to do all that, fighting SB4 here, 287G. I mean, we had firsthand of how they can just come and you're just driving down the street and they ask you, do you have papers? That's illegal. You can't ask that question. A police officer can't ask that question. That's what we fought for, for the police officers not to be able to ask that question and act as ICE agents in the streets. So yeah, I wasn't able to watch all of it because it really made me angry. It made me angry to the point where, we're considered just a number. We're considered a daily number, like cattle, like rounding us up like cattle.
I think exactly. I think that would be the same effect that watching the movie about how they see us, about the Exonerated Five, was for us. Angering. I'm ready to whoop that DA's tail by the time I got through watching that movie. And so I totally understand that. Nadi, did you watch Immigration Nation?
I couldn't. I watched the first couple minutes. I've seen that happen ever since I was a little girl. I'm originally from Long Island, New York, and we had a lot of Asian neighbors and a lot of Haitian neighbors from Haiti. That it was like every other week, ICE, the police, they would be there ready to take them. And my grandfather would willingly let them hide in the basement, you know, and my uncles would do the same thing because they knew their rights. And, you know, these are people who are working like 5 jobs, y'all, 5 jobs to send money back home or to save to hire an attorney. It's not like they were here to sell drugs or to prostitute themselves, you know, like, you know, how certain people want to make them out to be. And I couldn't watch it because my family went through something similar. We had a racist neighbor that would call them on my hand at any point in time. They would come knocking on the door. They would search the house. They would go straight to the basement. They would look for, you know, all kinds of, I mean, they would like ransack the house, and they didn't understand how a black Colombian man and a white Colombian woman could afford a house on their block. They couldn't get it, you know. And they would call immigration on these Asian families and all these other families that, you know, they just wanted to live like everybody else. You want a safe place to live. You want to have a decent job, food on the table, and some peace of mind. And that's all these people wanted, you know. I couldn't watch it. I started having a panic attack because, you know, hearing what my parents went through, and my father's family especially, they were so poor that my father and 2 sisters lived in a basement, and their father could only give them $30 for the entire month. So my dad dropped out of the 7th grade to take care of his sisters because they were brutally picked on and just made fun of, called names, you name it. It was horrible. And he worked illegally to take care of his sisters because his father couldn't afford to take care of all 14 children. So I couldn't watch it. I couldn't do it. It was just too much for me. It was just way too
And
much.
I totally, and I understand that, because when it got to the point where the child is being ripped from the father, and I see somebody ripping my son from me, woo, I can't handle that. But now, and I say this because I know that with Vanessa Guillen, we all know what happened with her. We had a lot of people collecting money in her name, and I've even had that happen for other victims for which I personally advocate. People will go out and collect money in their name. What I want to know from you all as experts in this field, what is the best way for somebody that's an advocate, a civilian, a regular person like myself to help in this type of movement?
I would say on that, in my behalf, awareness is key. To be able to get the information out there, not to kind of put your own personal twist to it, but to get the information out there to the people as much as you can. And then when it comes to raising money, of course, you want to let the direct family or friends be able to do that part for sure, because you don't know where the money is going. You don't know. And then anybody can do a GoFundMe, you know. But definitely to me, in getting the information out there, I say that awareness is key. Unity is key. Feeding the community and the people this information, the facts of it, makes it work to me.
Anyone else? All right.
I want to say something about that. We do have a community so-called leader who has
Can you speak up, Deborah?
we have a community leader, a so-called community leader who has collected money that has not given the money to the family. So I know exactly what you're talking about. I would say if you're going to give money to somebody for to help people with their statuses, I would say give to a nonprofit organization like Raíces, where you know that money is going to helping families. Actually going and paying for an attorney yourself. I mean, if you're trying to do something nice for a family, going to like this attorney here where you can go and pay for the legal fees, or go to an organization that's doing a fundraiser or something that has been transparent in the community, where that organization has been transparent, where they have, helped out people before. I mean, it's hard nowadays because everybody is, getting GoFundMe's and collecting money, and you just never know.
I agree. Attorney Penny?
I agree with that sentiment. I mean, please do your due diligence about the GoFundMe, because it's very easy to create one online, right? But I think in my perspective and the legal perspective, what I was mentioning about the domestic violence survivors, it's hard for someone to, even when they get to court, when they get a lawyer, get to court, they may not have a witness, right? Because it happens in the house. But if you do see a neighbor or a friend, check on your friends, especially during this pandemic, how they're doing. Because, if you have a situation where you think a neighbor has something going on, but you just turn a blind eye, this is not the moment to turn a blind eye. Please just ask how they're doing, Google online what cycles of abuse is, so you can see the signs of it. Because there's a lot of organizations that help with just the social services of someone who's been abused. And some people might, even if they get a hold of an agency like this, they might claim that they're not suffering from abuse. And I think that's part of the PTSD, right? They are going through this daily, that they don't think anything's wrong. So please, if you're a neighbor, friend, please, if you see something, say something. I know it's cliche, but it's really true.
All right. Anyone else? Okay. If not, and Danielle?
Dr. Grayson, real quick, you all. I want everyone who's watching this show right now, I want everybody to look up the word immigration. And I want everybody in their own spare time to think about who really, because we go to the whole legal thing, who really, root-wise, who's from America? Think about these things. We're having to go through all these visas and documentations to be in a place, in an environment or a country. Just think about who actually is really from, their roots are from America. So our children are suffering, and we're going through going through so many loopholes to find our children, and they're suffering, and the immigrants and the grandmothers are suffering. We want to be able to start checking these things out and look into it and see what's really going on. It's bigger than all of us. It's bigger than us. It's an agenda. It's an attempt. It's a thing that's going on that's bigger than our minds can even fathom. And the problem that we're having, that two things can't occupy the same space. That's why we're having so many problems. So that, we want to start doing our own research and finding out what's going on, because it's happening around, shifting, and things are going on around us. But the question is why. Everything has a cause and effect. And our children are missing, and our immigrants are suffering because of the hidden agendas.
I agree. Well, that's going to wrap this up. So next week, we will come back. We're going to do the sex trafficking next week, because I need for y'all to tell me about this entire tour that we can take around Dallas that tells us, that shows us. Somebody said there's a tour that goes around Dallas that will show you where this is occurring. Somebody said there's a brothel behind one of the biggest electronics companies in the world here in Dallas. I want to hear about all of that. All right. I want to thank each of you for taking your time to come educate me and to come educate others. It has been wonderful. I have actually taken notes, and I'm going to put my notes together so that I can share with other people. This will be a YouTube video that we can share after the fact. Just give me a few minutes to wrap that up for you. Again, thank you for taking your time, Attorney Ting, Deborah Mendoza, Danielle X, and Nadi Montoya. Thank you. Mwah, mwah, mwah. We will see you all next week. You all have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.